Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This reports for the 30th of November, and as we end the month, well, you can see from the beginning of the month we opened just a little over 2,700. We're right above 35 now. So, despite this massive gyration, pretty much neutral overall. But it's been significant because look at what we've created is this broad double bottom here with slightly higher bottom than the previous dip, which was not really what we were concerned about. The full dip. It was more about this 2635 algo level has been the support range, and you can see we ended up with our signatory buy signal as it was developing here at this base, and boom, popping above, and then of course once we get to the 23% we were still within it. But now we can see that potentially we have orange moving above green, but that doesn't matter as much when we have green above the cyan. So what we've had is the short-term buyers kind of fading off of this initial push. So that's relying on long-term and mid-term buyers to keep it going. But we're sort of in a consolidation from that previous peak. And the other day we had the rebound to the ABM green right here, which you can see because there's been no reset from this original buy configuration. And they put us right at this other algo activity at 2730 range. And the next one above is 62, so there's still plenty of room for a bounce if there's a continuation on this overall setup. Of course, perfect timing ending the month, even if there's softness here. By the time we get to the 4th or 5th, we're going to have that new fund money come in, and it gives a new potential. Plus, there's been a lot of money put on the sidelines, so there's certainly great potential, and it fits within the narrative that we had going into the end of the year, that you would be pushing back up towards the high levels. Of course, we're going to know when we get to that 50% level, right around the 75. So all good stuff. I think we've been spot on with what we've been seeing and knew how it was going to play out. You can see the NQ a little bit stronger from that pushback up above the 23%, but it suffered a little bit deeper decline, so relatively speaking, slightly behind, but needless to say, it's all been good stuff leading up to now. It's similar readings. Euro continuing to hold above that 23% off of this, and again, forming the exact same higher double bottom configuration, kind of typical at this time of the year for it. Bonds, of course, staying flat at this particular point because the Fed has signaled that they might be on hold just a little bit. However, with the yield where it is, it's still relatively high given what we're seeing. And with the oil, the salvation from really pushing interest rates, and that may have been part of the Fed's impetus to soften. Trump's doing whatever he can to counter the Fed wanting to continue to tighten by making it easier with reduced oil prices. However, it's still going to have a huge impact on housing, which tends to be a driving force because those higher rates certainly squeeze real estate in a big way. Gold maintaining itself again above that ABM gold, easy to see. Nothing new from that standpoint. So if we look at the 5K action, it was quite interesting because we were coming off of that continuation decline from the previous day, and then as we started to develop a little bit of buy signals, and it was kind of flat sketchy through a lot of this early range going through, and then we ended up with some really strange bars that were happening in here. Late buys that then got overbought, retraced, all within the same bar configuration, and then we ended up with some solid short configurations where we ended up with the significant cyan rising. At the same time, green is crossing below, you have steel crossing below the orange, and this is critical because I love these crossover points when they all happen collectively. And then, of course, the carry-through was green moving completely below red, but red had already started lower. So, I mean, from that standpoint, everything was pretty consistent with it. You can see the drop that creates. It was beautiful. And then we came down and produced kind of a soft buy off of the initial dip. We had the dip below the red line, so you kind of figured there'd be a attempted retrace of those lows. And that's what happens with a lot of these buys. And you have to be prepared for that configuration. It held up pretty good with the green going above, but then finally put in another softness, but at that particular point, green stayed above the red and was able to generate another buy configuration, which, again, those buys are a little bit tougher sometimes than the shorts. The shorts tend to have, and then we ended up additional buys further up once we had gold above the 50%, which we were kind of looking for that to push towards the highs, which it actually did. And it produced some soft sell signals in between there. This one I pointed out because it starts to look attractive. You get the steel going below, orange going above. You still had green didn't cross below, and that's one of those where it's like it didn't quite follow through till a few bars later. But at that particular point, you had the reset of the shakeout right here, and then it started to turn around, got overbought again, and then just did the exact opposite. And what was great about this is that you refill that, and then you end up with cyan below red, which tends to be an always buy configuration. At that particular point, that's when we started a little bit of a move back to the upside. The color is wrong, it should be the yellow side. But you didn't have the orange reset, so you tend to be a little skittish as those are going through, and you don't expect it to turn around. But what happens is that you start to get the shakeout turnaround, and it usually comes off of a pretty strong bar. And this is where the 76% range becomes difficult when you're still riding in that gold trend well above zero at this particular point. And that led to a whole other series of buys until we ended up with a very interesting one right here. You end up with these crosses. So it starts with the short snake, didn't quite fully develop it. Then you have the short snake right here. You got plenty of positive extremes, but what you didn't have was the green crossing the orange, and that's what I tend to look for right there. Now, at this particular point, you're like, oh, wow, that mouth is pretty open. Could I get a reversal? Sure. But this is where if you're playing it more towards the high end of the range, gives you more latitude. Now, in this particular case, it broke down quickly and easily. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes what you'll get is a little bit of bouncing or return back towards the highs until you get a real strong clarity. But in this case, the red had already rolled over, which was significant to that. And so when you get that across the green, even though it was a little bit more later than the snake had started, it just becomes a little bit more confirmed. And that it was happening right at an old algo's 2752 range. Very helpful. And then what you start to look for is steel crossing the red, which lets you know, hey, I've got to lower my stops because it could see the potential of a turnaround. What was important with that is that we're already below the red line, so less likelihood that it's going to bounce back. And then I'm looking for this cross over here, which is the steel moving above orange, saying, hey, the downturn may be coming to a significant end, and I'm looking then for that orange to continue to pop. This case, so much distance between them that best they would hope for was a little bit of consolidation until we got to right about this bar where it finally dipped below, and you can see that's what created the little pop. Didn't hold up so well because got a little sketchy fast right there. Even though the orange popped above, it was still staying long until you ended up, right about over here on this one where the cyan moves back above it. At that particular point, it was producing the attempts at a new buy with the rising red, so it gets a little convoluted right at that particular point. But the strength of the rising cyan with the orange moving back above right about here pretty much indicated no, that wasn't going to be significant enough for the buy setup there, and that's what led to, well, what we're looking at this particular moment, which is the softness right there. And so right now a little bit of the closing of the short mouth, and when that cyan moves above it, we'll kind of close it out. But if you don't get the crossover of the steel above and you're maintaining this kind of breakdown, we probably would expect to see new lows come out of that. Well, we're already at the lows for the pre-market and making new ones, so would not be inconsistent. What we'll be watching is the extreme here to see if it stays above. This particular level holds out. So, all good stuff. As I'll, it's nice with the weekend. I'll be sending out the indicators, gives you the weekend to renew everything and be ready for Monday's action to start December. Should be more excitement filling back in. Wouldn't quite call this holiday action now once the Thanksgiving ended. We've gotten quite a bit of activity, and I think that volatility has been beautiful. So hopefully you're enjoying it, because these are really some nice moves. Love it. So I will keep putting up anything relevant as it goes along, but the signals become exceedingly clear when you're able to follow that configuration and how important it is to see that orange continuing this. So if you get that rejection of the orange coming below on one of these earlier, as opposed to over here, but below the green, is when you tend to get those nice rally runs. So great stuff to look for when it comes to that, and it becomes very defining for us to be able to look at that DOC and really see individually how the market is going to react overall. So I think that becomes extraordinarily exciting to be able to be in that clarity position. So it makes it much easier to day trade in between moves like that. As always, though, continue to look for any additional updates that I might give on the Skype chat, and we will talk again later.